Have you ever felt so angry that it felt like your body was physically on fire? Or perhaps so consumed by rage that you didn't know how to express it without hurting someone else? What if I told you that in this moment of fierce emotion, you're standing at a crossroads of incredible power? One path that leads to becoming the anger, letting it consume you, define you, limiting you, and impacting others negatively. Or the other path, which leads to something magical, the ability to feel this fire fully without it stopping you, while remaining the powerful being that you truly are, a path that leads to truly healing this world. Today on Empower Me Monday, we're going to explore the profound difference between feeling an emotion versus becoming it. And I promise you, this understanding will change everything. Some of you know for over 20 years, I struggled with a severe panic and anxiety disorder. I wasn't just feeling anxious, I had become anxiety itself. I was an anxious person. Every decision, every relationship, every moment was filtered through the lens of being an anxious person. Then I discovered something revolutionary. I wasn't anxiety. I was an unlimited being who could feel anxiety. Do you see the difference? It's like the difference between getting caught in a storm and watching it pass by while you remain safe and grounded. Think about water for a moment. When you step into a shower, you feel the water streaming down on you, but you don't become the water, do you? You remain experiencing the water, feeling its power, but separate from it. This is the key to emotional freedom. You can feel rage without becoming rage. You can experience sadness without becoming sadness. You can know fear without becoming fear. Now, here's the manifestation secret where it gets really interesting. We've all heard that who you are manifests your reality, but that's not quite right. It's really who you're being consistently that manifests your reality. When you become an emotion, when you embody anger, fear, or anxiety, you're actually creating a vibrational frequency that attracts more of the same experience, further solidifying the way that you're being. But when you simply feel an emotion while remaining in your power, well, that's where real magic actually happens. There is a hidden truth about your emotions, something profound that most people truly miss. When you're feeling strong emotions like anger, anxiety, depression, or sadness, and the current situation doesn't quite match the intensity of these feelings, you're not actually in the present moment. You're in the past. I really want you to let that sink in. These overwhelming emotions are often echoes of moments when your feelings were denied, suppressed, or dismissed. Maybe you denied them yourself. Maybe someone else did. Or maybe you internalized that denial. Either way, these unprocessed emotions become like time capsules in your body, waiting to be acknowledged, accepted, and released. When I was 12 years old, right in the midst of puberty, already a very challenging time, my mother shared with me a truth that would shatter my world. The man that I knew that was my father was not my biological father. But here's the thing, that wasn't even what devastated me the most. When I asked who else knew, my mother revealed that everyone else knew. My grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, even my stepsisters, everyone except me. Can you imagine? In that moment, my entire world shattered. Every family memory, every interaction suddenly felt like a lie. And when I tried to express my anger, my hurt, my sense of betrayal, when I desperately just needed to be heard, my mother's anger slammed right back at me. She got furious that I was furious. We ended up in a fight. And those emotions, well, they never got a chance to actually be expressed or heard or accepted or received. Fast forward 30 years, a friend was talking about me behind my back to many of our other friends, never bringing her concerns directly to me. And when I confronted her about it, not only did she deny it, but she turned it around and made me wrong for even bringing it up. And suddenly I felt this rage, this overwhelming, intense anger that was completely disproportionate to the situation. I was so angry. I literally thought that if she was there, I'd punch her right in the face. That's how intense those emotions were. And that's when I knew, red flag, there is something deeper that was happening. This wasn't just about my friend's betrayal. I was really being triggered at that 12-year-old girl experiencing the exact same pattern. People talking about me instead of to me, denial when confronted, and being totally made wrong for my feelings. See, that's how it works. Our unprocessed emotions don't go away. They wait. They wait for a similar situation to trigger them, giving us another chance to finally heal them. So, how did I clear this? How did I break free from this pattern? Well, let me share exactly the steps that I took. I've also linked a free workbook for you to use as well. Here's the real work. I call this time travel with compassion. Call this healing your inner child, call it whatever else you want. This is what you need to do. You follow the thread of the emotion back and you ask, where is this coming from? And then how old were you when you first felt this way? What happened? What couldn't be expressed then? Maybe you were 6 when your sadness was met with,
"Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about."
maybe you were 12 when your anger was dismissed as
being dramatic.
well, these moments, they're living in your body right now. Next, you need to feel to heal. Allow yourself to feel what couldn't be felt. Give voice to what couldn't be expressed. Let your younger self know, I hear you now and I feel you now. This is critical. Next, acknowledge the full impact of what happened. How did it affect you? How did it shape your relationships? What patterns did it create that you continue to experience to this day? There is no right or wrong here. There's really just your experience and the awareness of it. And once you get the impact, that's when the real work happens. It's time to forgive yourself for having suppressed these emotions, ignoring them, and also forgive others who didn't know how to hold space for you. I mean, listen, as an adult, I wouldn't necessarily blame my family for my mom trying to protect me from being hurt, because that's really what it was, or even blame her. But as a 12-year-old, I did. And there's nothing wrong with that. The next thing, you just want to forgive the experiences that created these patterns to begin with. Now, when we bring it to the present moment, when your current situations trigger emotions, you can express to others how their actions or inactions make you feel. You can communicate without attachment to how they receive it, like whether they get it or not. That's not the point. Whether their behavior changes or not, it's actually not the goal. It's not what you're trying to accomplish. What there is to simply remember that this is about you accepting your own emotions and being free to express them, regardless if other people get it or not. And when you can hold that kind of space for yourself, you can actually start to hold space for other people. And you will be surprised as at how people will respond to you, because you're not in the business of making them wrong. You're in the business of simply sharing how their actions or inactions make you feel. Remember, their response belongs to them, not you. And here's the magic. When you're truly in the present moment, expressing your current emotions, there's a clarity and cleanliness that comes from it. There's no charge of the past, no old wounds coming and speaking through you, where it makes you feel like you want to actually do harm. You don't want to do harm. Now, this is what I call the freedom formula. You want to express your feelings without making them right or wrong. Allow others their responses without making it mean anything about you or them. You want to stay in a place of neutrality. The power position of emotional mastery is when you can finally get to a point where you don't withhold anymore. You don't avoid conflict. You don't defend yourself anymore. You don't try to protect yourself. You don't need to manipulate conversations to try to get your outcomes. When you're at that point, you have really reached emotional mastery, true power. You don't need to justify your feelings. You don't need others to validate them. You just need to allow them to exist and to express without judgment. You also have a power of choice in any moment. You really do have that power to choose. And here's another thing. When you're afraid to be angry because someone might judge you, that's actually a red flag. In that moment, you've already become the emotion because you're operating from fear rather than neutrality. I see this even with my 3-year-old. When she's crying and my partner says, "Stop crying," I ask him, "Would you make her stop laughing?" Of course he wouldn't. So then why would we make her stop crying? Both are just emotions and they're just being expressed. Really, there's power in being able to sit with someone else's sadness, anger, and joy without needing to change it. Imagine being so grounded that other people's emotions don't impact you, they don't trigger you. My first time experiencing this was magical. Not easy, but magical. I had a conversation with my biological father in my 30s. First met contact with him when I was 17. We didn't really have a relationship for various reasons, but we won't get into that. But in this particular conversation, he said to me, "You're a sin. You were made from sin. You will always be a sin. Don't you understand that?" And in that moment, I felt fire running through my body, like a complete hot flash from my feet to the top of my head, racing heart. I was sweating. The thoughts that rushed through my mind was like, it wasn't my sin. I'm the innocent bystander. But then something magical happened. Instead of becoming these emotions, instead of arguing or becoming the thoughts or having to defend myself, I just simply said, that must be really hard for you. I actually gave up my experience and was in his world. And he was really taken back by it. What? He said. And I was like, well, for your own daughter to be a sin, that must be really, really hard for you. You know, he was a very religious guy. I wasn't raised in a religious environment, but I got that he was a born again Christian. This was something very important to him, not me, but him. So I think he was really shocked because in the past, I would have met his anger with my anger. How my mom taught me at 12, meeting my anger with her anger. But instead, I responded in his language. Then I asked him, well, did God forgive you? And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, then why are you above God? Why haven't you forgiven yourself? And he had to really grapple with that. He had to be with that. And the conversation ended. For me, that was the first time I actually experienced self-love. Like, I don't need to convince you of who I am, not even my own dad. No, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you or anybody else of who I am. When I was able to give that up, I was actually able to be with him, love him. And the aftermath of that conversation was absolutely beautiful. Our relationship completely transformed. We had, in my 30s, started to actually build a relationship for the very first time. The thing that I've always wanted. One time I was having a hard time and I called him, which I would have never done in the past. But he became that safe space for me because I was that safe space for him. Called him crying about a situation I was having, feeling like I had nothing. That was my experience. And he laughed at me. I said, "Why are you laughing?" This man who once saw me as a sin said something that actually took my breath away. He said, you have everything. You have ultimate power. You don't need those things to define you, Crystal. You have the ability to hear truth and set people free. You did it for me. That's the power that feeling without becoming has, of allowing emotions their space without attachment. It's about creating space for transformation, both in ourselves and others. This is why I actually now call myself an emotional healer. Because when we learn to feel without becoming, to express without attaching, we don't just set ourselves free. We create space for others to discover their freedom too. And in that moment, I got what real power is. Now remember, your emotions are really like colors of a palette, and you can paint with them without becoming the paint itself. And this week, I really invite you to experiment with this distinction. When emotions rise, ask yourself, am I going to become this emotion or am I just going to feel it and let it flow while remaining free? Your emotions are sacred messengers. Your being is an infinite possibility. And the choice of who you're being, well, that is really your superpower. If this message awakens something in you, please share your experience in the comments. Let's create a ripple effect of emotional freedom in this world, one where wars don't start because everyone's experience and everyone's emotions are valid and just need to be expressed in the moment and accepted, received. And remember, you're not your emotions. You are an infinite being who gets to experience all of them. And until next Monday, stay empowered, complete what's incomplete, feel what needs to be healed, and be set free. You've got this.